your thoughts be on preemptively having that discussion as opposed to waiting for the question? There's something that seems so, and I can see both, and it depends on your family and the kind of way that you communicate, but I was wondering if anybody thinks that maybe in some cases it might be a good idea to actually sit the child down and say, we want to tell you about our family, to kind of set aside the idea that the question's going to come and we're on high alert for it. I don't know. What do people think about that?
It just seems like there's a great variation in children's interest in the question, like where babies come from. Some kids are really fascinated by it and they're digging away and they want answers. Others are completely blasé and they're just not bothered. So the part of me suspects it would probably be led by, that depends on your family, depends on your child. And also I would say that children come up with some pretty awesome language of their own to talk about their families. It's really cool. So we talk to children, so the children of surrogates, so their own families and how they understand what their mum has done. And they might refer to the child their mum carried as a surrosib, or if there's a donor involved, sometimes they use words like dibblings. And it's just really cool, it's really creative. So I think there's something to be said for an element of it being child-led, perhaps, and family-dependent.
And again, I think there's aspects of it that we've certainly chosen to sort of sit down and have those conversations. And also we're big on using major holidays as justifications and rationalizations for things. So like our child, like Santa left the note that said you can't wear the diaper at night anymore. The Easter Bunny took away the sippy cup. We utilize religious traditions in the way I think they should be, which is to manipulate your kid. So
that's the way they mostly are.
Absolutely. So with that, like every birthday since his first birthday, we call his surrogate, and he says, hello, and we have this sort of procedure, and it usually ends up being on his birthday is the day we sort of go through the story of how you came into the world. Again, each year, I would say we add a little bit of information. We've not gotten to the, which of you is the biological father, because we do sort of feel like we don't want to push that on him before he's interested in hearing that. When he's interested in hearing that, we're not going to, try to say, ooh, something's shining over there. We're going to be honest with him, but to sort of give that level of detail at this point just doesn't seem necessary. But covering the basics of it, I do feel like, we shouldn't wait for him to ask the basic questions about family formation.
So if we ever did try to preempt something, it would have been as a casual conversation, like asking them a question. Do you think there are more gay people in the world or more non-gay people in the world? At some point we thought that we needed to start getting them more immune to the fact that we're a minority. And our son said there are more gay people in the world. And our daughter said there are more straight people in the world. Not surprising, he sees, every man he sees in the street, he's assuming, especially if there are more than one man in that vicinity, he's assuming they're gay. That's his assumption. Our daughter sees a lot of women, and notices women more than him, and she probably assumed that there are more straight people in the world than gay people in the world, because she probably, I'm just reading that, then I'm into it. But I'm saying, we just asked the question and we started the conversation. But we didn't say, okay, let's sit down about the fact that we're a minority. But we did, by the way, use, I think the surrogacy issue is only really a subset here. The gay issue is obviously a very big issue in of itself. And obviously they need to start understanding, issues that relate to the fact that minorities are the kind of thing that some people don't get. So you look at other ways we're minorities, So in our case, at least it wasn't that hard to find. So we're Jewish, I'm from Israel, Daddy's from Canada, we have this or that other unique feature, and not everybody is like that. And talk about the fact that people don't always. Talk about racial minorities and talk about the fact that not everybody's accepting of the racial minorities. And I think that really helped them. And those were all preemptive to some extent to help them at least understand the gay issue and build immunities, which we really think they have by now, to the issue of why do people not like some aspects about our family? And that's going to come, and you don't want to wait for that.
Right.
So I agree.
Right.
I agree about that.
I also think we go into a lot of situations with unrealistic anxieties about things. I think we become hypersensitive as gay parents to potential stigmatization of our children, discrimination, prejudice, and all of those kind of things. Our son has grown up around what we call our gayborhood. So we have a group of two mom families, of two dad families, of single gay dad, and all of that. And because our kids have all been growing up together, that transition to school created a huge amount of anxiety for all of us, because suddenly they were going to be spending most of their day not with other kids from gay families, but with kids from straight families. And I remember we would start to do the pickup, and the first time one of my son's friends said, "Wait a minute, you're not that other guy that picks up Henry." And I'm like, "No, I'm his other dad." And she went, "Henry has two dads?" And my heart immediately sunk, and I thought, oh God, here's where the therapy is going to begin, and all of that. And her next words were, "Oh my God, I wish I had two dads." And there's this period where, and it's K first grade and so far second grade, where right now he's like high status because he has two dads. And for most of the kids, that's cool. And so I do think, but yet we were so anxious about kind of how that was going to sort of manifest itself. And so I think sometimes we have to relax. We have to just sort of, I wouldn't want to go into a situation unprepared and sort of unrealistic about how beautiful and lovely everything is going to be. But I think we can almost get too kind of wrapped up in the, danger, this is going to be a problem, this is going to be a problem thing, and just kind of wait and see what happens. And a lot of times it's far less sort of disturbing than we might think.
Well, I mean, I think it's worth saying, because we've been talking about this a lot, but of course we're talking about the adults, but in fact, to be clear, and I'm maybe a bit scared to say this in front of developmental psychologists, because I'm not a psychologist, but kids don't actually, young kids do not have a lot of anxiety about this stuff. Young kids do not find it hard to understand, well, they don't find it hard to understand gender transition. They don't find it hard to understand that there's different families and different relationships. That anxiety that's adult socialization. Yep. By the time they get into middle grades, they've fully understood difference, and they're nasty, and they're prejudiced, and all those things, which is the stuff we all remember more than kindergarten. But yeah, I mean, just to remind us that actually this stuff is not actually hard for our very young kids to understand, because they experience it. They know there's a difference between the people who they see every day and then these other people.
And they see it in the media, obviously. They see, which is why, having books that, I mean, we always try to kind of like counter it a bit. The books that we had in the book fair, for instance, and having, trying to look for movies, very hard, by the way, family-friendly movies that feature families like ours or gay people in a neutral, just matter-of-fact way, as opposed to being that the topic of the movie or the TV. We watched Modern Family together. We've been doing it, how long has that program been around? For quite a few years now. And for a while, when the new normal was out, and we didn't like it as a sitcom in general, but it was really all about our issues, we used that as an opportunity to pause after the episode was over and talk about those things. Like when the gay couple was kissing in the mall and somebody was, shouting at them. Those of you who've seen the series, we stopped and for the first time, an hour-long conversation started with our kids about how we came out of the closet and the kind of discrimination we had when we were kids, and how did we tell grandma and grandpa, and so it was really nice. I mean, but that comes a little later. But I'm saying it's always just being very, frank about it and keep it. I mean, they very well may be straight, but they'll never be, heterosexual or conventional, because they're part of our family. So they identify with our community. They identify with with our causes, and we're on all these reasons. So, and I want to just bring the issue of gender too. So some of the anxieties have to do with the fact that we're men and we might have a non-male offspring. So so the question of, what happens with, with girls. I mean, how are we equipped to, do the right things with them, be the right model. I mean, we don't have soft blonde hair. We don't, our 2-year-olds copy and,
Some of us don't.
Some of us don't have any. And then, so the question is like, how's that going to work, and I've seen a lot of people actually with surrogacy nowadays, people sometimes they keep saying, I want to, do sex selection. I want to make sure I have a son and not a daughter, because I've seen that in real life. And because how am I going to deal with the daughter? I mean, maybe there's some point, but I can give you some my own personal story, but I won't.
I want to hear your story.
No, I mean, in our case, our daughter always, taught us what it is to be a girl. We didn't have to, tell her what it is, what for her. I mean, because she was a girl, she is a girl. They don't. Nobody taught us how to be who we are, and what and we don't need to teach them that. I mean, it's out there, and there's so many female, people, people that are female in their lives, and vice versa, that it's never been an issue. And our gender is only one aspect of our identity. And our daughter very much appreciates that she has, a father that is a little more artistically inclined, than the other one. God, wouldn't have been awful if I didn't have any dad that's artistic as I am. And that would be the same as you said, not having a dad that has the same, genitalia that I have. It's like there are many aspects of parents. And, we always tell the story when she got her, her nails done for the first time with a neighbor, with a friend, a female friend that only has 2 sons. She immediately got it, and she said how much fun we both went to get our nails done because we're both the only female or the only girl in our family. Mm-hmm. Not because I don't have a mom, it's like because, Emily doesn't have a female daughter, and she's not, somebody to be pitied. Mm-hmm. But when it came to go do our nails, it was fun to do it together.
Right.
Diffusing a whole thing that in our mind was, oh my God, what do we do in that Korean place with all the things? We didn't know what to do, So we said, okay, let the friend take her, and it worked well.
Lucy, do you want to talk about some of the sort of research that has been done on sort of 2-mom families and the potential sort of for comparability in what we might expect?
Sure. I think there's not a great deal of research in general, but what is out there is mostly focused on lesbian mother families. And I think some of the concerns historically have been that kind of, there's an absence of a male, maybe this is going to have some kind of detrimental effect. And what's overwhelmingly come out, which is perhaps unsurprising, is that that mothers in those families make a huge effort for there to be male role models around, be it friends or neighbours or teachers. And actually I think there's a misconception that parents have this huge influence on their children's behaviour in terms of gender. So there's been a worry that if there's 2 mums, that children's behaviour might be particularly feminine. They're only going to play with dolls, or they're not going to play. And the research, again, overwhelmingly is that actually there are so many different influences on children and what they like playing with and what they don't, and that actually parents have a very minor role. So I would say they're 2 kind of overwhelming findings that have come out.
Yeah, just to kind of go off of that, which relates to your point as well, is my wife and I, when we were told that we were having a girl, there was like this excitement, but there was also this, okay, how is this going to go? And what was interesting is a lot of like the gifts that we got for showers were very pink, and a lot of leopard print, and stuff that I would not be caught dead in. And so we were trying to figure out like, okay, when I can dress her like this, and you can dress her like that, But the idea of gender roles also kind of came up in a sense, and so to kind of add to that, like we made sure that she has a good network of actually gay males. And heterosexual males, just by way of family.
So she'll keep getting leopard print.
And I will keep putting it underneath stuff. But it's true. I mean, I think the point being is that, and this relates to everything, is there's a bunch of ways to do this. There's a million ways to be male, to be female, to be gay, to be, so in essence, like thinking about how it affects, like as if you do that one thing, that's going to be what they do, is really assumptive. Because what I think you're actually instilling is that you can do this a bunch of different ways. You can, behave like this, or you can wear this and behave like that. So I think it's a case by case basis. But yeah.
I'm sure there must be some questions from the audience. We'd love to hear your questions, try to answer them, comments.
So we were at our synagogue a few weeks ago, and we were at children's services, and the rabbi said, how many of the kids here has two moms? And a few kids raised their hands. How many have two dads? How many have, and then she was like, how many have a dad and a mom? And all the adults raised their hands, because all the adults have a dad and a mom. And it really was interesting to see that our kids have a lot of different experiences, but most of us, have a dad and a mom. So obviously we're not raising our children the same way that we have our memories or our experiences, but a lot of raising our children comes from our own experience of being children and our parents. How do you deal with the fact that they are very different? Their childhood and their parent and our parenting is very, very different from what we experience.
I mean, my immediate response to that is thank God. And both my partner and I have, a code word that we use. We call it our safe word anytime either one of us starts sounding like one of our parents. And we just toss it out and we immediately change course, because we definitely want to do things differently than our parents did. But I do think that that's an important consideration, because we all had particular role models, and try as we might, I mean, that safe word gets used a lot in our house, because you still can't help but fall back into sort of routines and approaches and such that you were raised with. And I do think that like you said, in some respects, surrounding your kids with a variety of role models is one way to sort of kind of address the bigger picture of, us having come from heterosexual families, but our kids not necessarily growing up in that kind of perspective. So we really make sure that we sort of said, okay, and we kind of sat the neighborhood down and we said, okay, we got to open up the neighborhoods to some straights. We actually have to let some straights in. And we've got to sort of integrate them into our group so that our kids are not sort of spending the vast majority of their summer and their non-school time with this little enclave that we have that's very comforting to us, but isn't necessarily reflective of the real world. And so we've done that. And the straights that we picked are, of course, thrilled, because they feel like they've been, they're the chosen ones, that the gays want them to be part of their group. It's hilarious. But I do think that sort of making sure that your kids, our son is exposed to single moms and single dads and multiracial and ethnically diverse and all of that. And not just because we feel that's important, but because that's what we tend to surround ourselves with anyways. And where we have had to sort of pull in is on the heterosexual side, and to really make sure that that is inclusive, and that we even have had to make certain that, because kids start to hear everything when they get to a certain age, you lose the ability, first of all, you lose the ability to spell things anymore, because once they learn how to spell, that really screws you up. Because we used to spell everything and we could get by with it. We can't anymore. But we're very conscious now of straight bashing people, which you get a group of gays together and it happens. Little comments about the breeders and suddenly you're like, we can't do that shit anymore. This could really have an effect on our kids. And so we really have to kind of engage in a certain level of monitoring of that. And I think that's obviously something that our parents did not have to contend with. Our parents were not sort of censoring what they were saying, even about, gay people at the time, because that just wasn't a focus.
We do not live in a neighborhood. We live in a neighborhood where there wasn't a single same-sex family for years, and when there was, they were quite far apart. So I would say, in our case also, it never crossed the mind that there's something, strange or noteworthy about the fact that we both had heterosexual parents and they don't. Because I think they see a lot of different dimensions and aspects of differences that doesn't make them think that we're exactly alike in any way, you know. So, you know, there's the issues of background, of professions, of in our case, religion that are different from both of our families. So I don't think it ever occurred to us that there's an issue about it. I mean, it's just, that's the way it is. And they have, you know, cousins who come from, you know, racially different, you know, mixes and stuff. So it's just never an issue. It's just not, didn't occur to us that there's something.
You speak a lot about, you compare the dad-mom family structure to same differences as racial and profession. And personally, I don't know if I feel the same, because I do think that the parental and maternal kind of, and I know that I understand it doesn't have to be a mom and a dad, a male and a female, but I do think that there's something about that structure that provides something to a child in a specific way. And I'm not saying that it's a good or bad way, but it is in a specific way. And I sometimes get sad that our children will not, they do not have a mom, because we use the gestational surrogate, so they do not have a mom, and they will not see their surrogate mom as a mom. And that sometimes makes me sad, because I do think about my mom. And I know, I understand what you're saying, but I'm still...
That never occurred to me, because I feel that we do have those maternal and paternal energies and behaviors happening. You know, when we no longer have it when we had a play set in the backyard and out, you know, so sometimes I think those are almost opportunistic, you know, positionings. You know, one father becomes, or one parent becomes the more protective, the other one, just as the other parent says, oh, just go ahead and play. So I think it's almost like falling into roles just because you can, like, you know, balance it, or because it is perhaps something that we're different about. So I'll be the one, you know, don't do this, don't do that, you know, you're gonna get hurt, and, you know, my husband would say, you know, don't fuss. I stayed home with them for 3 years. I still work from home to be with them. I think, nevertheless, we both are able to have maternal warmth and comforting and you know, and physical affection that I did not have with my father. I certainly did not. And I think our kids no longer have that aspect. I don't think our kids would ever have said what you just did. Now, I might be wrong, you know, but they're old enough for me to at least assess that and feel that. And like, I see that when we watch, you know, tearjerker movies, you know, or stuff like that. And like, you really don't see the stereotypical, you know, reactions from our kids that you would see otherwise. You know,
they might feel sad that you never had two dads. You know, you just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to my mind, I mean, a couple things is that you should know that the way you're feeling about this is good and right, and you're not, I mean, it doesn't feel good to you, but it's not that, I mean, it's not a question of, there's not a right answer here. There's certainly not not a developmental answer that's going to satisfy you about is one better than the other. But as Lucy just said, I mean, I'm aware of the fact that I don't know any parents of any generation who don't look back and think about the things that they didn't give their kids, right, and worry about these things. And so as you were talking, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how other parents would be sorry about the fact they didn't raise their kids with religion, the fact that they didn't raise their kids. And it's not that race or religion is equal to orientation or gender identity, but I think that, yeah, I mean, I think it's, yeah, and that's sort of, that's the end of what I was going to say.
Well, and just to add up that is, I can understand too that there's an element of mourning, in a sense, of kind of wanting the thing that you experience for them to experience too. So it seems like very natural, but as you were saying too, like the dynamics is what you are speaking to, not just the person, but that any certain person can bring that dynamic, like a motherly dynamic or a fatherly dynamic to the table. But like, yeah, it's very natural to have that feeling of we are similar, but actually this is what is different about us. And I think it's good to pay attention to that.
More questions?
How are you? My name's Josh. I have a 7-year-old next week. She'll be 7 years old in I guess it's kind of, I'm not sure your name on the, what's her name, Ron?
Tara.
Tara. Just, I guess it's all about my anxiety and what's to come and where we're at. And we actually don't know who is the genetic donor for my partner herself. And she knows she's from a surrogate, and that's as far as we've gotten developmentally, what she's asked about from somebody else's tummy and so forth and so forth. But I guess the fear that I have all the time, and a lot of times when my partner and I split, is that you made a statement before about some preempting, you know, and giving this information early. There's things in our society that we always talk about that says, like drugs, for instance. Don't wait until your kids come to you and say, because they have all these things and they get into things and do things, because you haven't asked that question to say, you know, about drugs, let's have a talk, keep that open dialogue. So I'm having a lot of issues with how do I keep that open dialogue now, because most of it is not like, she doesn't have any idea about the egg yet, or hasn't come to us. Maybe she does. For instance, I was walking with her friends and I hear her friends say to her, no, you are adopted. Because I'm sure their parents don't know my story. I'm sure they said, well, yeah, you know, Mike and Josh adopted her. And she says, no, I have a surrogate and she lives in California, so she knows that piece. Yeah. So unless I said, yeah, and she goes, Daddy, tell her I'm not adopted. And I went, yeah, she's not adopted, but what do you tell the kids? But that's a whole nother discussion. But it's the fact of when I sit down with my daughter and say, or we sit down and say, do you know about the egg? How far do you know? And I usually sprinkle a question and see if she'll take a bite and go with it, and I understand that. But that anxiety is what I have, that I'm waiting too long for things, and then they also become taboo because, oh, we missed the window. She knows too much. It's very difficult to find that window. So I'm just throwing that out there going, that's where a girl about to turn 7 and 2 guys are going, and I feel, yes, we should sit down and give her more. And, you know, my partner wants to kill me when I bring this up and go, you're telling her too much. It's all your psychological bullshit in your family. You know, that's so it's hard to find that equal role between a couple. But more important than that, I'm more concerned from my point that you wait too long for things that you should get this out so they don't turn into taboo subjects, so they don't turn into bad subjects and things like that.
I think having spoken to parents in other kinds of families coded through sperm donation or egg donation, they say the exact same thing, and there is never this right time, or when is this right time going to come up? And it's such a difficult kind of challenge.
It really is. I didn't think this was going to be as tough of getting to this point and now saying. Like Brown, as I know how you formed your family, there are benefits of, from the beginning, having the book, having things, but you never realize, you can't see all the questions that come at 7 that may be more
My advice to you is sometimes to think of third parties. What do I mean? I mean, for instance, when we do the annual visit to their doctor, you know, she goes about, I don't know if it's standard procedure, also asking the kids an open question. Is there something that bothers you? Rather than is something hurts you or something like that. And sometime, you know, at one point, our daughter said that kids, you know, ask me all the time about where I was born, how I was born. And like, oh my God, you know, what's going on? And she just said, when we let her explain, as opposed to our you know, imagination go wild, it's just, she doesn't want to be the center of attention.
But I guess the hard part is, which I think is a great suggestion of your pediatrician, but then you have to give your pediatrician the permission to say to your child, to focus in that area of going, do you have any questions about where you came from? You know,
she wasn't focusing. She was just asking what bothers you.
Right.
And you know, and another kid would have said that, you know, that this sport team, you know, lost.
Right,
you know?
I lost.
And you know, and this is what, and she, you know, and I think that's a very good practice. Or sometimes other people, you know, ask questions, or, you know, or the kids react to other people's questions. Sometimes we do ask them, you know, not if there's something bothers you, but, you know, do kids tease, you know, do kids tease each other about certain things at school, like trying to fish,
well,
you know,
here's an example. My daughter went to day camp this summer, and it was, at one point she did turn to me and said, I'm not telling anybody about my 2 dads. And I, of course, took it as, oh boy, here comes the embarrassment or the uncomfortable, all those things are starting to come. And I let it go for that. I told my partner, I came home, I said, we have to be aware of this. I wrote a whole page when she started school day 1 this year to the teacher, letting her know where she was at. And then when I said to her again, and I usually ask this way, like, is there anything with the 2 dad thing you want to talk about? And she goes, no, I love it. You know, everybody tells me they wish they had 2 dads because moms are so bossy, and that's her thing, that she's happy to have, like you said, thrilled with 2 dads. Everybody wants 2 dads because moms are bossy to them. And that's all her concern was. And I said to her, well, you didn't say anything this summer to people. And she's like, just because I'm tired of the question, not that you have two dads, but them all saying to her, you don't have a mom?
Yeah.
Like that question. She's just tired of that question. Not embarrassed, not anything, just tired, which makes sense. But it's so hard to navigate all those things unless you really talk about them and dig that out. And you don't know whether you're asking too many questions. So that's just my statement. It's tough.
I mean, I also think you brought up an interesting point about the sort of assumption of adoption. Because with gay men in our society, gay men with children, the assumption of the general public is you must have adopted. I don't think the immediate leap is to surrogacy.
Exactly.
That may shift over the years as more and more surrogacies happen, but there is that sort of belief that most kids of gay men came through adoption. And so I do think that sort of explaining to kids the difference between surrogacy and adoption is something that I would want to do preemptively, that I would want to make sure that, again, recognizing the sort of developmental level of each kid to make sure that they're clear on the differences. And again, for us that's easy because our son has a number of friends who came through adoption in their family formation. And so he's able to sort of articulate, oh, so-and-so's from surrogacy, so-and-so's from adoption, and he gets it from that perspective. But I would think that is an important sort of distinction to make sure that kids get, because they are going to get that.
That is hard, though, is saying even if you make a distinction, surrogacy is when somebody else carries you, and adoption is when a family, you go to somebody's family who takes you in. Those kids, that 7-year-old Bessie Feinstein is going, that woman who carried you, that's your mommy. And when you do it gestationally, it's not your mommy, it's more complicated.
Right.
And the kid's not at 7 years old able to go, okay, she's telling me it's my mommy, my daddy's telling me not. In reality, it's an egg, it's just too many things that are difficult. So, it's very complex, the adoption thing, because all of the kids think that's your mommy out in California, and that's what they keep telling them.
Right.
So is the concern too that it's how you're going to field the questions, or that you're not providing her with enough?
I just think giving her too much can screw up, and giving her too less can screw up. So I'm all about, I want to do the perfect time at the perfect moment, because you just want to do that.
There's the problem right there. There's no such thing.
no such
I know, but that's the anxiety going, should do now. If I wait a year, it's going to be too long. Like when you mentioned the pediatrician, all I think is, well, she won't ask the right question. We'll have to wait a whole other year, and this and all that kind of stuff. So it's really a fear of just that for her social development and welfare, that the best timing can be had and understanding.
I think from the adoption literature, the children that kind of report like really positive family relationships and that it went well for them finding out about their adoption, it was that feeling that they felt able to ask questions. So that openness of I can ask anything that I want.
And I say that to her all the time, which is you can ask me anything about any of the topics.
So I think that
she has it. I don't know, some kids are a little more reserved than other kids.
And plus, a lot of kids also may not articulate their question. They may behaviorally act it out. And not necessarily that something is wrong, but there's a lot of emphasis on waiting to say. And I'm not advocating to say everything up front. I just was saying that for everybody it's different, and there's a bunch of ways to go about it depending on the fit and the relationship you have with your child. But I can imagine that that will come up, and it'll be hard to control for those variables, but to kind of just know it's normal and have somebody to at least talk to about it. And to say, she's acting like this. I'm not sure if that means, or it could just be regular kid stuff. I don't know if any of us really came from parents where we were like, they told us too much.
I actually did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
My father was
I'm not
a sex
surprised.
therapist.
I take that back.
But to speak to that, it didn't. I mean, you're not going to scar them, right? You're not going to scar them either way. Not actual those kinds of scars. Those kinds of scars come from different kinds of parenting. So I mean, I would say, without knowing you or your family at all, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety about it, you should do something about it. You should feel like you have to negotiate with your partner or husband, but if that's your feeling, also your kid is probably sensing some of that anxiety. So if it's a lot, and I would say get a good book, right, or even a mediocre book, because you can take apart with so many bad books, but then you can do a bunch of social critique in them. But it helps a lot. Or even when you were talking about the third party, the thing that then came to mind, and then Jeff, you just said it, is just to say, you're not talking about your family, but actually, so do you know the difference between adoption and surrogacy? And you could talk about that for 5 minutes, tops, in a way that has nothing to do with your family. Like, this is a lesson I'm giving you. And if she's bored, and you can do it, if you have a car, I don't know how people in New York do this, because in most of the world, all of this kind of sex education happens in the car, because parents and kids don't have to look at each other. In New York, I don't think you drive, so I don't know how it works, but if you do have opportunity in the car, do it 5 minutes in the car. Maybe you may be uncomfortable, she may
Right.
be uncomfortable, you leave it at 5 minutes, and then you'll see if something else happens. But it sounds like you're like stressed about it, and so.
Well, just I don't want to miss that point.
Right,
I don't
right,
want to miss
right,
that
There's no one
time.
point though, there's no window. It's 1,000, it's 1,000,000 windows, it's true.
Yeah.
I have a question about donors and how do you disclose when and how you disclose to your child about the egg donor. I mean, lesbians having kids have kids for decades with sperm donors. Some closed, completely anonymous. Some are friends. Some are open. In our case, it's not a completely closed egg donor, but the door is kind of open. We've never actually gone there ourselves, but we know that a lot of kids are looking for the genetic donor or dad, whatever you want to call it. But what's the denominator? How many are not looking, and how much are you curious as a child? Is there any data on that from lesbians especially?
There is data
Can you
on.
repeat the question, because maybe people in the back didn't hear.
So the question was, as I understand it, do we know much about how interested children might be in their egg donor, or if there's a possibility, if it's an open donor, of contacting them or reaching out? And it's a real mix. We can never really know a percentage of how many are interested, because we don't know a percentage of the population as a whole. It's not easy to do any kind of stats on. But there's websites like the Donor Sibling Registry that have a lot of users sign up, and a lot of them are parents. They're not always children. Sometimes parents are more interested. And as I said, like, it seems like in the same family you can have very different interests in children. So someone like a son might be very interested, and a daughter might be not bothered. But it's something like the DSR has hundreds of thousands of people signed up. So there's certainly, I would say, there's a lot of people out there who are interested. And from adoption, we know it can be at different times and for different reasons. So sometimes adopted children get interested when they have children themselves. So it's, I would say for young children, that understanding of eggs and sperm and what that really means in terms of inheritance, that generally comes a little later on, I'm guessing. I mean, this is what we really want the data on, but generally in adoption, it's at those later ages that adopted kids get more interested in searching. So there's no real answer to your question.
Is there data, though, on when that becomes a focus or even an obsession, about what effect that might have on behaviorally and well-being of the child?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think some people search and they are extremely content with their family and family relationships, and it's just curiosity, and that's what we find most often with donors, is curiosity, like what does he or she look like? It's not, I'm looking for a parent role. So we haven't got much research on it, but that's one thing that does keep coming out.
If kids don't have the answer, let's say, I mean, I was a sperm donor in med school. We all did it 25 years ago, and the last thing I'm interested in is somebody knocking on the door, say, oh, I want to see how you look like. It was very close, very anonymous, and it was a deal then, and that's a deal now. And I think it's okay with me, but will a child understand and respect that? Like some adoption cases were closed, and we have to respect them. Others just didn't want to have anything to do with it, and that was how it was understood. And with the kids having some kind of grief when they learn that the door is not open, no, you can't find out anything about your genetic parent.
I think there's been a range of experiences. So I think for any donor offspring who perhaps feels disappointment, there's others that feel contentment with it. I don't think there's a...
Or relief, because they don't, because they're content with their existing family structure and they don't have a need to know.
Yeah.
I would say it depends obviously on when we ask that question. I tell people, if you ask that question before you start the process, then do something about it. You know, there are options now to have a known donor, and that's never an obligation. It's always just an option. So you can exercise that option or not. And I'm saying to the extent that, especially it's something that crosses your mind, then do something about it. Obviously, if that's no longer an issue, then you deal with it differently. But when our kids finally found other kids of gestational surrogacy of similar age, when we went to our family vacations to like a gay family camp, they were struck by how the other, actually they were also twins, how obsessed, their words, the other kids were about who's their egg donor. Okay, so they told me, I'm not going to name them here, but those two kids, oh, they talk about that all the time. Obviously, they probably don't talk about it everywhere, but they might have been talking about it because this was a gay family camp, etc., and the issue might have come up that way. But, our kids it just seemed strange to them. So, it doesn't matter statistically what the situation is. I think it's always good to have more options than fewer options. That's my feeling.
And it's also, there's a lot to tell children, and it's a lot for them to wrap their head around. So it's the fact that there is an egg donor, and then later on perhaps those questions of who that is, can I perhaps contact. It's like a real process that unfolds over time, and the likelihood is that all of the family, all of your perceptions will change as that time goes on. Like maybe there'll be interest at some point and complete disinterest at others.
And I think some people, maybe just to complete that thought, some people might, when they start thinking about egg donation, known or unknown, let their insecurities lead them by saying, if she's known, maybe my kid's going to think that's their mother. If she's known, maybe she's going to want to have a role in the kids' lives. If she's known, maybe the kids when they're 16 is going to run away and go to her. And I think first find out with yourself if that's the reason. That's where you come to this issue. So just think about it for a minute. I just didn't think that way, and I think that in my mind, even if those risks even theoretically existed, I just think it's better to have the option of just showing them that stranger at some point, and for them to realize that that's a stranger and move on. Now, if you think that no, they're going to see that stranger and fall in love with her, then deal with it when it comes. But I think to begin with, you have that option. To have that option, it's better to not have that option. That's my feeling.
If you really want predictability, get a plant.
not if you're me.
They're just much more predictable than children.
Plant dies.
I have a question about how do you, having twins, we have twins, and they came from one of us, not from both of us, navigating a discussion about which dad was the sperm donor, was the initiator, versus the dad that wasn't, sort of having that discussion about why did you choose this dad to do that, and does it make any difference, and just wondering if you've thought about that and if you've even had to approach that yet.
We have not, but we know our response, which is that because we did traditional surrogacy, it's a little different. So we both provided a sample, and it was let the best sperm win. I mean, we won't say that to our child, but the way we're going to explain it to him is we were both part of the process, and it's sort of like then flipping a coin. And sometimes you flip the coin, you get Daddy Chris. Sometimes you flip the coin, you get Daddy Jeff. It's the same sort of thing in terms of the sperm that produced you. That's how we're going to explain it. But we haven't been asked that yet. And
so if they ever want to sort of go down that road further and really investigate the genetics behind that, how do you?
The genetics behind in terms of why one of our sperm won, or
what it means.
It's either you or your partner.
Right.
And so if they want to investigate that further, like, well, which one of you is it?
Oh no, we'll tell him because we know.
I see.
Yeah, and we'll tell him.
I see.
But again, we're going to tell him in the context of just like that there's biology and there's parenting.
Right.
And you have two parents, one of whom is also your biological parent. You have two dads,
right,
one of whom is your biological father.
But to speak to kind of both what Ron and, is it Tara?
Tara.
Sort of point to, I think you both of you need to think about what does it mean to you? What exactly does that genetic material mean to you? So for some people, that's really important. It's my DNA, it's my heritage, it's this, it's, and for some people it doesn't matter very much. But like having the two of you have that conversation just for yourselves, because again, like most of us, like when are we ever invited to think about that stuff, right? We're not, like in school, it's not something we're encouraged to think about. And So to give yourselves space for that before you're then getting into those deep conversations, because these conversations are kind of metaphysical in a way. And so for the two of you to have thought about that, then you can share your values, right? It's just another opportunity to share that stuff.
I think also, and that's very true, we need to kind of break it down to, what are the meaning, components of that question. And like, when I think about, our genetic material that we pass over to our kids, I'm thinking that, I'm already suspecting that they both got my bad back, and I know that one of them got the musical talent that couldn't have come from me. But those are just like matter-of-fact things. By the time any of those things would come up, they already have been living with us for years.
Right.
They're our kids for years. We're their parents for years. That's the important, big foundation.
Yes. The other thing we've done in anticipation of this conversation is we've really sat down together as a couple and identified the clear genetic traits from one of us that have been passed on to our kid and the learned traits that have been passed on from the other one of us to our kid, so that when we do have this conversation about the biology, we're able to say, look, Daddy X contributed some of these aspects of who you are, and Daddy Y contributed these aspects of who you are just by being in the same house and us being raised together and that sort of thing. Yeah, we definitely have crafted that conversation amongst ourselves so that we don't sort of err on putting too much emphasis on the genetics. Because
guess what? There are all these traits that none of us gave you. And,
right.
and what does that mean? That you're
and
not
then there's this other shit you do that didn't come from either one of us. So where did that come from?
But,
so,
but the meaning behind it is purely, it's a matter of curiosity. But like, what does it mean that we love you more or less because, you have this or that trait of ours? That you would love us more or less because we share this or that trait with you? What does that mean? We're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes. But
other questions? Comments?
How many people had to get a sitter to get here today? I know some of you didn't get a sitter, but we really like the fact that you guys came, and we would like to have more programming for not just people who are in process or beginning their process, but rather also the people that are already parents. So we're just going to continue learning from you what you want. We have a survey. How many people here filled a survey with us already about their process? I was afraid so. So please, we have surveys on our website. If you are already a parent, if you're in process, put a mental note to do it when the day comes. You can wait 24 hours, but then send us a survey. It's really important because I'm sure some of you benefited from those, or others I know are very much benefiting from it. And part of what we ask in those surveys is what kind of programming you want. And you're a self-selecting group, so I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised that one of the first things that people mention in those surveys is that they would like to have a program about speaking to your kids about their origin. And maybe in a year or two we'll know more, than we know today. Especially if you sign up to the research that.
Thank you. Yes.
How many of you have children between the ages of 4 and 8? Great. Please see Lucy afterwards. 3 and 8. Sorry.
No.
3 and 8.
Yeah.
Please see Lucy, and if you know other gay couples with kids through surrogacy, with kids between the ages of 3 and 8, it is, I'm not directly connected with the study, but I can tell you as a researcher, it's really vitally important that we collect this data and that our families get represented. Our families are just as important as all the other families that get researched, and we will have much more information and education to be able to feed back to this group if these kind of studies are successful.
And just to reassure you, make it a really enjoyable experience for you as well. It's not horribly boring, I promise. We really enjoy talking to you.
And let me tell the people watching us from home that there are several other researches happening, since this will be on YouTube. One of them, 3 of them actually, or one of them happening in 3 different countries in the UK, Paris, London, and the Netherlands, where they're looking for parents of babies, basically.
That's right, yeah.
So that's a similar research, but for much younger age group, and to the extent that anybody in our network knows or is watching this video or whatever and can participate. and if they can also refer them to some heterosexual couples who could be in the control group, that would be helpful as well.
And Jeff, lives of fathers as well, the other research.
And we have a section on our website, and soon after I have a good night rest, we'll put more of this information online on our website, because we have several researchers that asked us to help spread the word, and they'll all be on our website.
There was a question in the back, too.
Is the study for heterosexual surrogacy as well? Are you including, or is it just based on gay surrogacy?
We're looking for heterosexuals who used IVF as a comparison group.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Perhaps also with surrogacy, but it doesn't have to be with surrogacy.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what kind of, are there any studies that you know of that do research on surrogates' children, who have been surrogates, and what the effect on those children are?
Yes, we actually have just finished one at the centre in Cambridge, and it was fascinating. We I think it was a sample of around 30 surrogates, and we spoke to the surrogates, their partners, and their children, and it was a very interesting mix of findings. I think some of the families stayed in contact for a long time with the families that their mums helped create, and others didn't so much. And it was a real mix. It wasn't necessarily a different story for gestational and genetic. It was actually much more diverse and interesting than perhaps you might think. But please look on our website, and Vasanti Jadfer works a lot with surrogates and surrogate mothers.
Great. Thank you all very much.